And we're also still keeping an eye on flooding near Black Creek in Clay County. It may have left more than just a mess to clean up. Health officials want people to watch out for some hidden safety hazards.
You're going to be finding some pesticides, herbicides, some of that wash off that's going to be coming from the soil in the water. There's also going to be microorganisms, bacteria, viruses.
Floodwater along Lazy Acres Road in Middleburg, it has mostly receded.
But in the Carolinas, it's a much different story. Later in the newscast, a look at the conditions in South Carolina. We begin, though, with News4Jax reporter Eric Avanier live in Clay County. Eric.
Well, Joy, what a difference a day makes. 24 hours ago, this entire roadway, this section of Lazy Acres road was completely underwater. In fact, it was under so much water that people that lived along this roadway had to use boats to get out of their home. Most of the water has receded. However, we're still seeing areas where there is some flooding on people's properties, in their front yards and things of that nature. Again, most of the flooding has receded, but there are still some dangers health officials want the public that live here, the people that live here, to be aware of. While most of the floodwaters along Lazy Acres Road have subsided, there are still areas of flooding on the road and in people's yards that are concerning to health officials. One concern is the possibility of this standing water being chemically and biologically contaminated. Florida poison control medical toxicologist Dr. Sonia Rashid says if you're cleaning up your property after it's been submerged under floodwater, you need to protect your skin, especially if you have any cuts or sores.
You want to wear long-sleeved clothing, long pants, boots, gloves. Make sure that you're completely protected, that you don't have any exposed skin when you're cleaning up the debris.
Dr. Rashid says when you're done, make sure any clothing that got wet is placed in the washer and make sure the water is hot to help decontaminate the clothing. Chemical and biological contamination is not the only concern with this floodwater. There's also the threat of encountering a snake that has been displaced.
They can swim in the water, so you might encounter them there. They can be under your branches, so when you're picking them up, you might have disturbed that snake, and so you're increasing your risk of potentially getting a snake bite.
Should you get bitten, there are some do's and don'ts to know about.
So you want to make sure when you first get the bite, you don't put ice on the area, you don't try to suck out the venom, you don't put a tourniquet because that can restrict blood flow, and that can actually increase your risk of having the extremity fall off.
Dr. Rashid says you want to call 911 or poison control for help and then get to the hospital as fast as possible. Even if the snake is not venomous, its mouth and teeth can carry all kinds of dangerous bacteria that can get into your bloodstream. But snakes are not the only critters that are known to bite during and after a flood. Fire ants also become displaced.
Yeah, the red ants are the worst. They float in piles and they don't die.
If you're wearing the protective clothing with getting your feet covered, your hands covered, your legs covered, your arms, you should be okay.
But if you do get bitten, it's best to keep an eye on the wound to make sure it's not getting infected. Dr. Rashid says she has seen several patients with ant bites that got infected and needed antibiotics. Fire ants will likely climb onto your feet first, so you'll want to keep your feet covered. Pro tip, if you're wearing pants and combat boots, it's a good idea to tuck the pants into the boots to keep the fire ants from crawling up your leg. In addition to the threat of contamination, snakes and fire ants, this stagnant water is also a breeding ground for mosquitoes, something that folks, as you can see living nearby, don't want to have to deal with.
The water table already being high and that stagnant water isn't able to go anywhere, then yes, mosquito populations will certainly start to increase. And really, you'll have kind of a mix of different species coming in. So you'll get those floodwater mosquitoes, and then in about 3 weeks later, if those water bodies haven't receded and haven't been treated, then you certainly could have our Culex populations, which vector West Nile virus.
And once again, a lot of the floodwater has receded, but as we walk over here one more time, you'll see that there are still areas where there is just some stagnant water that remains, and that water is still pretty high. I would say, if I had to guess, about 1 or 2 feet just in that little location, and then there's some more on that side that you can't see because it's so dark out here. Reporting live in Middleburg, Eric Avanier, Channel 4, the local station.
Thank you, Eric.